I wouldn't necessarily call myself a Christian nationalist simply because it has such CNN derogatory connotations. Now if
Yeah.
they mean by that as a Christian, I love my nation, of course, but I also love the world. I mean, the church I pastor is a Global Vision Bible Church, but we can't discount the fact that God is a God of nations. Every tribe, every nation, every tongue, every language, cast their crowns at the feet of the Lamb and said, "Thou art worthy." And so he is a God of nations. And so I tell people, look, I'm not just trying to save America. I'm trying to save Americans. And if we save Americans through the gospel of Jesus Christ, which is still the power of God into salvation, Romans 1:16, then we will effectively save America. But I do love this nation because I think revival is baked into the soil of this nation. To say that we weren't founded on Judeo-Christian principles is utter nonsense. So I don't like the phrase. I don't like the stigma, Christian
Yeah.
nationalist, but I'm a Christian and I do love my nation, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So when I hear people say Christian nationalist, I think there's obviously two different parts to that, but I want to get your take. I think whenever people talk about nationalism, this is what I think they mean, that nationalism is the exaltation of my nation over all other nations. And it's the pursuit of my nation's interests to the exclusion or maybe even the detriment of other nations.
Right.
So if that's a definition, would you say, yeah, I'm for that, I'm against that? How do you
totally
respond?
against that. As much as I love America, and I do believe we're the last bastion of freedom and capitalism, at the end of the day, we send people all over the world. We just shipped a missionary over to Africa. We got people in Canada. We got people in the Philippines, and we love the entire world. For God so loved the world, not so God loved America, right? And so, no, I definitely would not adhere to that type of, philosophy.
Yeah. Okay, so let me press in even further.
Yep.
Christian nationalism. Here's, again, what I think people mean when they say it. And I'm pulling these definitions off of various articles and other places. But I want to give you the chance to respond and, say, no, I agree, I don't. So they would say it's a populist, right-wing movement which believes that America was founded as a uniquely Christian nation chosen by God to bear his identity and carry forth his prerogatives internationally. How would you respond to that?
Well, ultimately, all nations are supposed to be that. All nations should have a prerogative to preach the gospel. I mean, we're made in God's image for God's glory. And so I don't think America is special at that point, but I do believe that God has given America a very unique platform. I mean, once we're done, once our capitalism is gone, once we fall eventually to socialism, then the whole world knows it. I mean, everything's going to be run by the, lack of better terminology, the globalists, the elite, the bankers of the world, because America is still, again, that last bastion of freedom. And so I think all nations ought to be the image bearers of the gospel of Jesus Christ, not just America. So I don't think we're exclusive and that God's just going to bless us. But the fact that he has so abundantly favored us and we have been able to have such a beautiful alliance with the nation of Israel, I think that's why God has blessed us. He promised that he would do that. And so, to say that we're, racist or we're bigots or we hate the rest of the world because we love this nation, I really think that's kind of a play on words. And so I think a lot of times all the definitions that we get are, like you say, you get them out of these media exposés and things like that. But I don't think they even understand what Christian nationalism is. I'm not a racist. I'm not a bigot. The head of our, deacons, our elders is a black gentleman. The lady that leads our worship is Latino. I mean, when you come to Global Vision, it's really an eclectic group of people. They're all different races, all different nationalities, all different types of people. And so I've been painted in the corner as this racist bigot when we've never had one issue in 15 years of our church with a race problem. And we never will, because that's just not who we are.
Yeah, no, I appreciate what you're saying. And if I'm understanding you correctly, it's that, look, you think that all Christians have a calling to carry forth God's prerogatives in the world. And it doesn't matter if you're American or you're Nigerian or you're Mexican or you're Brazilian, that's your calling in life. And I think I would agree with that. And I maybe, just to be honest with you, even feel a little bit surprised. I think I expected you here to say, yeah, God has a special, unique covenant relationship with America that makes it stand apart from those other nations that I just listed.
No, I don't think so. No, I don't think so. He has a covenant with the world. He has a covenant with his people. I don't care where his people are right now. Obviously, we've done some things correctly that has secured the favor of God. And again, our alliance with the nation of Israel. But to say that God has this special covenant with this, there's other nations that have experienced revival as well. Maybe they didn't foster it and propagate it the way that they should. And so the hand of God was, removed. But at the end of the day, we are going to fall. America is going to fall. I happen to believe, the whole Mystery Babylon stuff. But regardless of where you are prophetically, we are going to fall one day. There is no doubt. But I just don't believe it's going to be now. I don't believe it's going to be to Biden. It's not going to be to socialism, because I don't think God's through with us yet, because he is able to use America as a great platform to continue to get the gospel out. That being said, I think we're almost receiving as many missionaries these days as we are sending missionaries these days. So the handwriting's on the wall.
Yeah, yeah. Now you've mentioned Israel several times, and I'm curious to lean into that because my guess is you would say this special relationship or God's use of America comes before the nation state of Israel. I mean, obviously Israel starts in 1947; it's established by the UN, and I mean, to be honest, if you look at the history, even Republicans have kind of had a back and forth relationship with Israel, really up until George H.W. Bush, and then George W. Bush, who really leaned in and said, "No, we need to have a strong relationship with them." So I'm curious, is that relationship based on what's happening in Israel between the U.S. and Israel, or is it something else?
Well, I mean, Republican, Democrat, two heads of the same snake, as far as I'm concerned. But at the end of the day, I do believe, Genesis chapter 12, whether it's an individual or whether it's a nation or whether it's a church, because we've collectively experienced this as a church. If we bless the nation of Israel, God will bless us. If we curse them, God will curse us. It's pretty much that plain. And so I know there's a lot of people, want to call you Zionist or whatever, or say that that's not really the nation of Israel. God is not done with the nation of Israel, 100%. Those are his chosen people. The Hebrew people are indeed God's folks. And so I don't care if it's George W. Bush. I don't care if it's Trump. One of the reasons I do have a great affinity for Trump is because he was a friend to Jerusalem. He was a friend of the nation of Israel. And I think everybody knows that. And the left hates him because of that. Joe Biden is no friend to the nation of Israel, 100%. He has no friend to the nation of Israel. And so I think that America and other nations, if you look historically at the record and the narrative, any nation that's ever turned its back on Israel is in the sewer dump of history. It's just not going to be blessed. It's impossible.
That's an interesting historical statement. So you're saying since 1947, the establishment of Israel, any nation that has turned their back on Israel,
before the actual establishment, just people that have come against the Jews in general, the people of God. But yeah, certainly since then. I mean, there's not a whole lot historically that we could say about the prosperity of any nation that's turned against them. I mean, they're all socialists, they're all communists, they're all anti-God. You can't have socialism with God. Socialism is political atheism.
So how would you, again, going down the same line, how would you respond to people who would point out that there is a rich and very dark history of Christian anti-Semitism, that what happened in Nazi Germany simply didn't happen without Christians? I mean, even guys like Martin Luther for hundreds of years beforehand being deeply anti-Semitic.
There are pastors today that I know that would have been the first to put a Jew on a boxcar if it was still alive today, they'd put a Jew on a boxcar and then quote Romans 13, type of deal. So there's nefarious people that just give into the tyrannical, buck wild, demon possession of the government type of a deal. And so you can't erase history. And so I don't care who they were or what they did. Anybody that stands against the nation of Israel does not have the favor and the blessing of God upon them. I just don't see any way around that.